I've been working in a rural teaching hospital, Mahatma Gandhi Institute of Medical Sciences, Sevagram, for the last 4.5 decades, where I run my outpatient department, I round the wards, I also look after ICU patients in addition to palliative care patients as well. So, over this long inning, we have admitted hundreds of thousands of patients in the various wards and also in ICU. And if our hospital statistics is anything to go by, roughly 1 of 8 ICU patient dies in our hospital. And these people represent a wide spectrum of medicine, right from heart attacks, strokes, chronic lung diseases, TB, cirrhotic livers, failed kidneys, fulminant sepsis, snake bites, pesticide poisonings, suicides, road traffic accidents, and so on. So, on an average, our ICU registrars sign one death certificate every 8 hours. So, given these numbers and given the spectrum of illnesses that we cater for, sometimes these tragedies do move one and create a very lasting impression and impact on mind. But I am not here today to talk about death. I wish to speak about conversations. And I guess the best way to set the ball rolling would be to tell you a story. The story is about a 86-year-old male who was living in a town near our hospital. He was 86, was carrying years of uncontrolled diabetes and blood pressure, was turning frail, and in the last few days was hardly eating when one night he simply collapsed. There was no one at home except his wife, and his only son is a software engineer in Bangalore. So his wife called his son asking him to rush, and his son took the first flight from Bengaluru to Nagpur, thinking all the while that all should go well with his dad. But by the time he arrived in the hospital, his father was already in the ICU. A ventilator was pumping his chest. The monitors above his head were showing crisscross chaotic numbers, and the intravenous lines were passing through his chest. The son arrives in the ICU. Shall we continue? The ICU resident in the midnight asks. What's the diagnosis? The son asks. Well, he had a large hemorrhagic stroke. The stroke is large enough to cause a massive cerebral edema, and the blood in the cortex is also finding its way into the ventricles. He is deeply unconscious. He has been intubated, ventilated. He has a central line. His creatinine has gone up. His ABGs don't look good. Shall we continue? The son looks at his mother. She is crying. His sister has also just arrived, and she begs that let us do everything that is possible on this planet for Papa. But his uncle, who is 80-year-old, and he has grayed his years having seen 80 summers, silently asks us that enough is enough. I think withdrawal of these life sustaining measures would be the best thing. So, there is no agreement between the family members, there are discussions there, and the question that should we continue does not have any answer. The family is not making a decision, they are only making guesses, and I am afraid that this story plays out all through the length and breadth of our country, in the metros, in the towns, in the taluka places, in the village hospitals. The settings are different, the socio-economic status is different, the disease spectrum could be different, but more or less this theme keeps on running in the hospitals there. And families are suddenly asked to make life and death decision in the middle of the night, when they have never had a conversation of what the final exit from this planet should all be all about. So, for years in Sevagram, as a physician, I kept on naively believing that this is a system failure, that this is a failure of our healthcare system. But then over the last decade or so, I started realizing that this is not a system failure, this is not a healthcare failure, it is a much simpler, probably a more preventable problem. It is a failure of conversation. I remember having done my MD medicine from GMC Nagpur in 1980s. There, we are beautifully trained how to make a clinical diagnosis, how to order tests, how to interpret ECGs and X-rays, how to write prescriptions, how to monitor our patients, how to prepare them for surgeries and so on. But nobody at that time, and even later, and even I see in the medical schools all the country today, nobody teaches these young graduates and residents in the hospitals how to prepare for that final eventuality, for the final chapter in one's life when one is about to exit. Can we make that final chapter more beautiful? Can we make that final chapter more meaningful? Can we make that final chapter more dignified? Well, nobody teaches. And that is a problem. And that occurs because nobody talks about death. Death has become a taboo subject. So, like sex, everybody wants to know about death, but nobody wants to talk about death. And this occurs in probably all 800 odd medical schools in our country as well. I remember, but I do not recall exactly who said it, but those lines have stayed with me, that the best time to talk about death, the best time to speak about death, when death is nowhere in sight. One should talk about death when death is probably miles away. One should talk about death not when one is a patient, but one is a healthy person in the pink of health, and that is an appropriate time when we start now discussing death here. So, why India needs this conversation? If we had gathered about say 40 years ago, but I realized that that time there was no Google Meet, well, I would not have told this story. But in the last decades, India has completely changed. When I began practicing medicine in 1980s, few people lived into their 80s or 90s. Most people would die at 60s. Most deaths were undiagnosed deaths. And that was a time when we had a joint family system where 3 generations would share a single roof, where a single house would have parents, grandparents, grandchildren, uncles and aunts. Most decisions were made joint decisions. The doctors would enjoy a deep respect in the society, and there used to be, and death was more or less acceptable at the time. Today everything has changed. Now the people are living in their 80s and 90s, which is a triumph of modern medicine. We have heart attacks, we have strokes, we have cancers, we have got autoimmune diseases, we have got degenerative disorders, but these disorders can be managed. People live longer and they live with this disorder for a decade or two, but then these disorders also come with adverse events, and these adverse events are, these people are frail, they are fragile, they have got coronaries and they have got cataracts, they have got chronic organ failures, they frequently fall, and more importantly, as the years go by, well, they become completely dependent on their loved ones. The families have completely changed. Gone is that joint family system in our country, and now we have nuclear families, and many elderly people live alone while their children are working in Bengaluru, Pune, Mumbai, Delhi or Kolkata, or even in San Francisco, Tokyo or London. And when an illness strikes and the father develops an emergency and is admitted to an ICU, the decisions are often made over a mobile phone call on their iPhones or on a video chat. Yesterday, I heard Dr. Kamlesh saying that, well, this workshop is all about sunset years, and I really like that concept, Dr. Kamlesh, sunset years. Now, these sunset years, as you yesterday very wisely pointed out, they do not begin at 70, 80 or 90 because age is just a number. One can be very fit at the age of 95, one could be very frail and fragile even at the age of 70. So, the sunset years begin when we realize that our best years are behind and, well, the years ahead are now rather short. This is not a depressing thought. I think that this is a liberating thought, because when we see the sun setting, we prepare for the evening. And as our old elders told us during our childhood, we must return home before the darkness sets in. So, that sunset is a good transition between a day and a night. It also prepares us that the dark is about to come. We should not be afraid of that darkness. We should rather welcome darkness, and we should be mentally prepared now how to cope with the darkness which is about to fall in the evening of our life. The sunset years also require us to prepare so many things. We need to write our will, we need to write our living wills, our advanced medical directives. We need to clearly know what are our ambitions, what are our aspirations, what exactly do we want in the evening years of our life. Do we have some plans? Do we wish to go for some vacations, go for pilgrimages, see granddaughters marriage, waiting for a grandchild to be to arrive on this planet? There are so many things which need to be accomplished, but then the time is short. The problem is we avoid these conversations, and more often than not we avoid these conversations because of love. We love that person. We think that it is inauspicious to talk about death. That Sanskrit adage goes, Satyam bruyat priyam bruyat, na bruyat satyam apriyam. Whenever you need to talk, make sure that your speech is pleasant. Don't bring those unpleasant or bitterness in your speech, and death creates that unpleasant conversation in the home. So, preparing for death doesn't mean that we are giving up on life, far from it. So, who can change this story? And I strongly believe that among all people, there are these family physicians who can write another script and make sure that when this story ends, well, it ends well. I keep on asking these family physicians that why don't you take this task? And their answer, physician after physician, meeting after meeting, is, sir, we are already running an OPD of 40 or 50. Our OPDs are filled with hypertension, diabetes, osteoarthritis, acidity, depressions, chronic kidney disease, and so on. There is no time. And then they say, nobody wants to listen about death. So why should we? My straightaway response is that if not you, the family physicians, who else would? Would it be an intensivist who is seeing the patient for the first time in his life in an ICU? Would it be an oncologist who is seeing the patient again for the first time with a metastatic widespread lung cancer? Would it be a first year junior resident in a medical college hospital who has no idea what life and death is all about? So, ultimately it is the family physician who knows this family for decades, who has treated the grandparents, the parents, the uncles, aunts, sisters, who knows about the socio-economic background, who knows about their wishes, about their concerns, about their unvoiced concerns. He or she is the best person to prime these people to prepare for that final chapter of life. So, advanced care planning is not a long legal document. All that you need to do is just ask a couple of questions. And what those questions are, they are very simple. You would ask them, what matters to you when your health becomes very bad, when you are, say, confined to your home? And they would say that, well, I do not want to disturb my activities of daily living. I need to go to a temple every day. I need to teach maths or English to my grandchildren. I want to read, I want to write, I want to pursue my hobbies. Then you ask them, what worries you most? And patient after patient, month after month, decade after decade, the answer that I hear from these patients, what worries you most, we don't want to become dependent. All our life we had been absolutely independent. Now the time has come and we don't want to burden our children and grandchildren. We do not want that our activities of daily life will be dictated and driven by those who love us or our caregivers. Then you should ask a third question, that should an occasion arise when you are not able to speak for yourself, this could be a large hemorrhagic stroke, this could be a roadside accident, this could be a certain sepsis with multi-organ failure where you are intubated and ventilated and so on. Who should speak for you? Who becomes your voice? In the words, who is the one in your family who knows your wishes, and now because you are no longer to speak for yourself, that person would become your spokesperson, and this could be a spouse, a son, a daughter, a son-in-law, a daughter-in-law, a brother, a sister, and so on. But every person must identify a spokesperson who can speak on that person's behalf when that person is admitted in an emergency. The next question that you need to ask is that, are there any treatments which you would definitely not like if you are admitted to an ICU in the terminal stage? Most of these people had visited ICU, they have seen what exactly happens in an ICU, and then they might say that, well, I don't want a ventilator, no dialysis for me, definitely not those chest compressions, no those DC shocks, no those life sustaining measures, not another round of chemotherapy, not another surgery, and so on. So often the people are very clear, they can very clearly identify at least those don'ts there. And then ask a final question, where would you like to be when you are about to say goodbye to this world? And almost 100 out of 100, 100 out of 100, they would say that home, sweet home. Surely not hospital, surely not ICU. I would like to die at home in the midst of my loved ones. So simple 5 questions, isn't it? And it doesn't take more than 10 or 15 minutes if you have already established a rapport with your patients, know their family well, and now they are not afraid to articulate what bothers them, what concerns them, what are their wishes, and what exactly they would like to be if a catastrophe suddenly strikes them in the evening of their life. Please allow me, Dr. Kamlesh, to share a personal experience. Just a couple of months ago, in March 2026, I lost my elder sister. She was living in Indore. She was fighting with an ovarian cancer for the last 6 months. She had an extensive surgery for ovarian cancer. She underwent several sessions of chemotherapy. But a year ago, we found that the chemos are no longer working. The cancer was spreading beyond her peritoneum and in her pleura. And at that time, I have had a good long conversation with my sister. And I asked her that you are now turning 80, you had a good fight with your cancer, we all appreciated how beautifully you fought your cancer, but it looks like that now we are fighting a losing battle. So, where would you like to be in your final days? And what would you, the doctors, including me, to do for you when that final day arrives? And she was very clear in her mind. She said again, no hospital, no ICU, no ventilator. I want to die in the very house I have been living for the last 40 years. I would like to die on the very mattress on which I am sleeping for the last 30 years. And exactly a couple of months later in March, when the occasion arrived, well, because the family members knew her wishes, there was no confusion, there was no guilt among her son and her 3 daughters, and she passed away and she died a very beautiful, dignified death, surrounded by her loved ones in her own house. Let me give you another example. My own teacher died last year. He was 93. For 40 years, he taught physiology to Government Medical College Nagpur, to MGIMS Sevagram and another private medical school in Wardha. He was known for his beautiful teaching skills in neurology, isn't it? Come 90s, and he started getting chronic kidney disease, needed a maintenance hemodialysis, became a bit frail. A pneumonia caught him. When his three children, they called me. We had a joint session and they said that what should we do? And I counseled them that I said that sir had lived a long life, a very fulfilling life. Now the time has come that we don't want to spend the evening of his life in the hospital in the ICU. So let us bring him home. He was brought home and he spent the last week of his life in his home with Bhimsen Joshi's beautiful music in the background, with all his family members, which all his two sons, his two daughters and a son, all are doctors, two are living abroad. They were all holding his hand and he died the most peaceful death. A week after he died, his daughter called me and said, "Sir, thank you, sir, so much for offering our father such a beautiful death." So, death need not be ugly, death need not be sad, death can also be beautiful, provided we start understanding what life and death is all about, and death is surely a final exit from this planet. So, the moral of the story is that a peaceful death is not an accident. It is not always possible to know when and where would I die, but at least we can make preparations well beforehand. And if everything goes right, it is probably possible to exist this mother planet in as peaceful, as dignified and as respected manner as one would have conceived when one was alive there. Having said this, then why these conversations become so difficult and so challenging? Because there is a constant tug of war. And the family members are caught between the skila of love and the charybdis of guilt. There are social pressures, there are family pressures. There is always a guilt that if I am not offering my mother the best treatment in the country, then probably I am guilty. People might accuse that I am trying to save money, isn't it? And then there is also a love that, well, why am I torturing my mother? They are not able to take these decisions. So, when an elderly person becomes very critically ill, the hope pulls on one side, the fear pulls on one side, unless one wiser counsel comes and he said that enough, enough is enough, let us either withhold or withdraw those life sustaining measures. Over the years, I have seen hundreds of children who are living abroad when their father or mother is admitted to a hospital. They pick up the first flight from San Francisco or Melbourne or Tokyo, quickly arrive, and then when they arrive, they not only bring luggage with them, but tons and tons of guilt because he or she hasn't seen her mother or father for last 2 years or 3 years, hasn't hugged them, hasn't had a meaningful conversation with them, have had only a weekend 3 a.m. their time chat with their parents when the video links were terribly broken. And there is a massive guilt now. Well, what do I do? Their first response is 9 times out of 10, their first response is, "Doctor, do whatever is best for my mother. Money is not a problem. Get me a best intensivist, best oncologist, get me to the best tertiary care corporate hospital in the country, get me the best chemotherapy, immunotherapy and so on. So, money is not a problem." I know that his requests are not medical requests. I know his requests are coming from a deep sense of a sadness and guilt. And therefore, instead of countering him that, well, now we can't do anything, this is the last stage in his life, we have tried everything, I don't do that. I take an alternate path and say that I know how deeply you love your father. I can feel that love. I empathize with you. But let's also think what your father would have wanted in this situation. Our responsibility today is not to prolong his life, but to ensure that we honor his wishes. And suddenly, almost dramatically, the scene changes. The conversation now moves from monitors and machines to the very person who is lying on the bed. And suddenly, we take that massive guilt off that son's heart and now we start accepting now that what are the best alternatives which are available at the time. In Sevagram, which is a very small village where I live and teach medicine, I am surrounded by people who are very poor. They have no money. And often a metastatic cancer, a stroke, a chronic lung disease, a sepsis, a snake bite, or an organophosphorus poisoning becomes the proverbial last straw on the camel's back. They have absolutely no money. And if we admit them to the ICU, now start offering them heroic measures, the latest monoclonal antibody to fight against cancer, the third generation, fourth or fifth generation cephalosporin to fight his pneumonia, isn't it? When the person is already in the extremes of a life, well, we not only endure what I call a financial toxicity, but we also start now prescribing futile therapies there. And these futile therapies now completely ruin the families. They might beg, borrow, steal money from somewhere. After all, this is his mother or wife. But in the process, suddenly find that the next year his daughter, who was in 8th grade, now stops going to the school. His son, who was aspiring for a medical or an engineering career, now becomes a roadside mechanic because the family has lost all their reserves and all their revenues. And probably we, the doctors, are equally and ethically responsible for incurring those catastrophic healthcare expenses and writing futile therapies and conflict and inflicting on them what is called a financial catastrophe. So, what are the remedies then? Isn't it? The remedies are simple: a single conversation. That's 10 minutes that perhaps you pick up a phone, get the son living in a Melbourne or Moscow or San Francisco on a video call, explain to him when his father is around, make that conversation meaningful, bring them on the same page, and I am sure that 15-minute video conversation between the son, father, and you can prevent those periods of catastrophic healthcare expenses, those guilt, those futile therapies, unnecessary prescriptions, and unnecessary interventions which become a part of an ICU. Before I sign off, let me tell you another real life story. And this real life story is about Dr. Sushila Nair. Dr. Sushila Nair, born in 1916, was a Lady Hardinge MD Medicine. She obtained her doctorate in public health from Johns Hopkins. She was India's central cabinet health minister in Lal Bahadur Shastri cabinet. And more important than that, she was Mahatma Gandhi's personal physician in late 30s and early 40s and went to Yerwada jail, Pune with Mahatma Gandhi for about 2 years. 2.5 decades later, in 1969, she founded the country's first rural medical college in Sevagram in 1969. And 3 decades later, in 1999, when she was 86 and she had already had 2 heart attacks and congestive heart failure, she was not keeping well. But she insisted that she would not go to Nagpur, she would not go to MGIMS Delhi, she would not call cardiologists from abroad, but trusted her own physicians in Sevagram, the professor of medicine. And such a beautiful bond developed between Dr. Sushila Nair and the professor of medicine that one fine morning, when our professor was having a breakfast with Dr. Sushila Nair, he casually asked her, we used to call her Bahanji. We asked her, Bahanji, if a day comes in your life when you are not able to speak, what should we do? And she smiled and said, I have lived a full life. मैंने महात्मा जी के साथ जीवन बिताया है, जवाहरलाल जी को देखा है, लाल बहादुर शास्त्री के कैबिनेट में मिनिस्टर रही हूँ, इंदिरा जी मेरी मित्र थी, इस कॉलेज की मैंने स्थापना की है, मुझे ज़िंदगी में और क्या शिकवा है? If there is a chance to recover, please treat me. But if any time you feel that my time has come, I would not like to be in the hospital. No ICU for me. No ventilator for me. no DC shocks for me. And a year or two later, when the time came, because the physicians in Sevagram already knew what were her wishes, well, there were no conflicts there at all, and she died one of the most beautiful, dignified death in her own cottage, although her cottage was just a 2-minute drive from the hospital ICU. So, the point that I am trying to draw here is, I gave you 3 examples. These are not exceptions, these do occur, provided we the doctors give our patients an opportunity to make these meaningful decisions in life, take those guilt from the survivors or from the loved ones, and ensure that, well, if when one has to go, well, one would leave this planet in as peaceful and as dignified a manner as is possible. So, what should you, the family physicians, do? This is Friday night, this Saturday night. I am sure that you cannot completely change your practice Monday morning, but all that I want you to do, that every week just pick up one person, spend 15 or 20 minutes with that person, isn't it? Ask those 5 questions which I enumerated during this session, isn't it? Get to know what is in their mind, document them, if possible do a 5 or 10-minute video chat, isn't it? Record that video as well, and if every week you pick up one such person, probably in 2 years you would have 100 families, and those 100 families would be eternally grateful to you for ensuring that, well, they have the most glorified, that they had the most peaceful, they had the most beautiful exit they could have imagined, and they did not spend their life in the ICUs and going through those ICU rituals. So, let me sign off with a thought that has stayed with me for years and years together. The best time to talk about death is when death is nowhere in sight. And preparing for death doesn't mean that we are giving up on life. In fact, it means that we are respecting the life so beautifully and so deeply that we ensure that the final chapter reflects the very values by which that life was lived. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.